Everyone. Thank you so much. Now I'm just going to introduce Amichai Greenberg, who is the director and writer of the film. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing this really beautiful and complex film with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor.
So I just wanted to start off a little bit. It's such a complex and layered story, and just what drew you specifically to this story and your personal connection to it? It's a big question.
Well, I'm a son and a grandson of Holocaust survivors. In fact, New York is a special place for me because my grandfather and obviously my father, and after the war, they came here, basically nothing, but they had themselves, they had the family. And here they lived, and here my grandfather passed away. So it's moving for me to be here and talk about this. So my connection is, obviously, I'm the second generation. But the thing that moved me towards doing this movie was the journey of identity, the identity crisis. That was the topic, or the existential experience that I was moved by and took me to make this movie. And when I looked for the environment or where would it happen, for me it was obvious that it would be the Holocaust, even though in my eyes this isn't a Holocaust movie. For me it's a story about the present. And I hope there's one more thing that was extremely important for me is the silence. I wanted to deal with silence. I myself was raised in a form of silence and absence that took me a very long time, and maybe until today I'm deciphering this enigma in me, this silence, and you could see it in Yoel.
Absolutely. I think just the silence sort of connecting to another theme of denial that comes in the film in two pretty large ways, externally from the people that he's dealing with on the council, but also internally, like within his own community, and as he's sort of reckoning with this news. I just hope you would speak a little bit more about the theme of denial in a larger way.
Okay, so even though these are very different forms of denial, these of the perpetrators and of the victims, but yet as the experience of a second generation that is faced with this silence, he's like caught in this vacuum of no speak, and it happens with his mother that does not share her story with him, and I think he feels that in the air, and maybe that's why he chose to be who he was. And he's very connected to facts, because for him this is the only thing you could lean on. When really his journey there, I think in a way he's blocked, because when you're seeking for truth as an historian, I think this thing of looking for facts is the way of searching for external truth. But for internal truth, I think you need a different set of tools. And that's where I think he fails in a way, because he doesn't know how to do that.
Absolutely. He's grappling, and he's in this difficult place between fact and the different layers of truth, his personal truth and the external truth. And I think it's really beautifully done, seeing him go through that journey. I wanted to ask you, too, at the beginning it says that the film was inspired by a true story. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about that story and how you came to that.
Yes. Okay, so basically, it doesn't seem like that, but I started writing the script with a personal journey. And I just had a hunch that I'll find an interesting story in Austria. For some reason, I just felt it. And I wanted a story that would be able to be the metaphor for his internal abstract journey. And this thing of uncovering the truth under the ground, finding the bones, atzamot in Hebrew, the essence of who you are. So I thought this bouncing between those two stories would allow us to understand his journey more. But as for what you're asking, so I thought it would be in Austria. I went to Yad Vashem. I asked them for some kind of a story that has not been solved yet. They sent me to Lithuania and Ukraine, but I really wanted something that is close to us, the Western world, something more civilized in a way. And they contacted me with a researcher in Yad Vashem who didn't know, but he gave me a name of a Austrian historian, which his name is Walter Manoschek. And I called the guy, and he just told me about this story because this was something he revealed in the beginning of the 90s. It happened in a place called Rechnitz, which you could look up in Google. And that story was revealed after the archives were opened in the 90s. And I felt that that story could work for this film. So the actual story is very close. The biggest difference is that the grave was never found. A lot of the names, the dates are true. Even 3 German testimonies that you see here in the film are real testimonials from that village. These are actual people that did not tell where the grave was. And there was a documentary done in the 90s about it, and I took those testimonies from that with their permission. So until today, this grave was never found.
Absolutely. I actually related to that one to ask you about the ending of the film. So deciding to have the grave be found and have Yoel make this big discovery, how did you decide to make the ending that way when it was different from the actual story? And how is that related to his character?
I think that when you actually find something, then you ask yourself, what did I really find and what didn't I find? And I think the essence is still to be searched. Mm-hmm. And so on one hand, Yoel finds the grave, but what about him? Mm-hmm. And this is the question we're left with. Absolutely. And this is what I wanted to leave us with.
Absolutely. I think he's such an interesting character, and his personal search for identity and the little ways you planted that along the way was really fascinating, and how the story is not over for him, even though this case has been solved.
Neither for us.
Yes, exactly. Just another question before I open it up to the audience. The film screened at Venice to a standing ovation. It recently won the best screenplay at the Beijing International Film Festival. So this has been all over the world.
Thank you.
I want to sort of ask a little bit about the reception of the film and like your experiences of taking it abroad, but also showing it in Israel and the U.S. and how people sort of been reacting to the film.
So it's for example, in China, it was a huge surprise. It moved people there, and I really didn't expect that. I must tell you a story. When I did the film, we did test screenings, and I invited my parents there. And my father, that back then was alive, when obviously was in the screening, and we asked him afterwards, he wants to say something in public. He didn't want to say anything. 2 days later, he didn't say anything. So basically, I gave him a call. I asked him, what did you think about the film? So he said, look, I think it's a very authentic, very truthful story, very Jewish, but would be interested to see it. So I was in a shock for a few seconds, and then I understood this is exactly the reason why I did this film, because this is my inner struggle with my father, in a way. Mm-hmm. It's about finding trust in the world. Mm-hmm. And we have different experiences, and we're different people, and this is my journey. And my journey is to, I don't know, I feel like I can afford believing and trying and hoping. Mm-hmm. And it really paid back, because really audiences all over the world, Jewish, non-Jewish, were moved by it. And I think this issue of identity and who are we when there's nothing else left is crucial, and crucial nowadays. So it receives a very warm welcome, and I'm very happy.
Absolutely, thank you. So we'd like to take a few questions from the audience. We have a crowd waiting outside, so if we can keep them brief, we'll have a microphone coming around. Oh, sorry, just one over there, and then shut up.
So thank you for this very, very powerful film. I'm going to ask you a question which is not directly about the film, but I'm asking it both as a second generation, a child of survivors, and a committed Jew. I've heard a number of people say something to this effect, that the Holocaust, that most people, when they think about Jews today, the first thing that comes to mind is the Holocaust, and that few of them know anything about Jews beyond that. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is your theme, but since you touched so deeply on the place of the Holocaust in our identity, what do you say in response to those kinds of comments?
Okay, I think the end of the film gives a good answer. And it ends with the title, In Honor of Those Who Lost Everything and Chose Life. And why did I decide to do that? I think usually when we speak about the Holocaust, we focus on the victims, which obviously have their very strong and important place. I'm focusing about those who chose to live. And I think to choose life after all you've gone through in those circumstances is extremely courageous. And I think this is something I can take forward. I think that us as Jewish people, I think when we speak about all the things and the pain that we've gone through the generations, I would like to emphasize that we didn't stay there. The ability, which I feel is a great inspiration for myself, and I think it could be for other people, is the ability to transcend pain into hope, into belief, into building, into creating. We're only one generation away, and look where we are today. And this is quite an amazing thing. And I think you never forget where you came from, but you go forward with it. And this is something that I would like to take. And I would like other people that would ask this question to look at that. I think it's a very important thing.
I think we'll take one in the middle up here.
You want to pass it down?
There, yes.
What are your hopes for Yoel moving forward?
So it's basically, I think it's a very personal question to each one of us, and I won't ruin your experience with mine. I mean, you have your own answer for that, and that's, I believe, I would like to provoke a big question of who are we, what are our core values, and the absurdity of this situation, which you see Yoel as a person that on one hand is so extremely Jewish, but yet on the other side, he doesn't see that. And it's a really big question for us. And I think, at least my generation, we have a responsibility towards the coming generations to answer that question. Who are we as Jews? What are our core values? And I think we're missing on that. I come from an Orthodox background. Nevertheless, I feel we're missing something. We're missing the big picture in a way. And this soul is a bit lost. So I think it's very important that each one of us has his own answer for this question.
Absolutely. We'll just take 2 more questions in the middle. Yes, right here.
Just really quick. The point where he shaves his beard, how did you kind of attribute significance? Okay, they didn't find the graves. It sounded like, all right, this is it. This is the end of the road. But when someone shaves their beard like that, it's like almost like a pivotal moment. So can you explain that?
Well, I think I wanted to provoke in that question because it does 2 things. On one hand, I think it's a certain despair, and he's left with truth, and he can't look at himself in his mirror and tell a lie. That's on one hand. But on the other, he also peels off something. And I wanted to touch this place in life that we have the opportunity to choose our life. We don't do it always. Not all of us do that. We can continue living the life that we were brought up in. So we could live without choosing our life. And I wanted to show a person that chooses. He's forced to. And usually in life we are forced to do that because it's out of our comfort zone. But this is really this ground zero place of us as individuals that I wanted to touch, which I've gone through, and I wanted to share that with others.
I think it's really interesting also framing, like as you said earlier, his present day, very contemporary struggle in the context of him grappling with a past struggle. And I think those just like mirror very nicely. I think we're gonna take one more question up there.
First thing I want to say, your film was brilliant.
Thank
And being a childhood survivor, I so agree with you. I always say that my parents' stories are my North Star. It's my guiding light, and they chose to live. But my question is, which I found very interesting, is you use the story of, the mother had not revealed who she was and she wasn't a Jew. Did you use that as the question of what Israel's being faced of who is a Jew and conversion?
First of all, definitely yes, and it's quite a coincidence that only a week ago the former minister Nissim just presented his new suggestion of how to create conversion rules in Israel. But I also wanted to say something else. We are faced with two characters, the mother and the son. And in a way, when she says in the end, zivug mishamayim, which I hope everyone understands, or most of us, a match made in heaven, really those two words, on one hand, you don't understand anything, but then you understand everything. So I wanted to show this two approaches to life. I was raised in Israel. I'm the first one in my family born in Israel. Yet, I feel that Judaism of diaspora has a very different character. And the Israeli character is very idealistic, meaning there's one truth and you fight all the way for it, and that's what allowed us to survive so far. While the diaspora Judaism contains paradoxes and contradiction. And it's so Jewish. It's exactly like these pages of the prayer book, that on one hand, on one side there's the prayer, on the other side are the victims. And this whole contradiction is our belief. And I wanted to show those two approaches and how each one of us could learn from the other. And we're all, these two approaches to life, I relate, even though I was born in Israel, I really relate to this ability to contain a paradox. I feel it's bigger than life, and that's what I wanted to show.
Great, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask another question for our audience. What are you working on next? Where can we find you next?
Okay, so I don't want to keep you too long. So basically, I'm writing, now it's a comedy. Not about the Holocaust. It takes place in Israel, and it's inspired by an American book I read when I was 18, which is called Zen and the Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance. And it's basically a journey of a father and son, and I wanted to portray it in the Israeli desert. And we'll get there, and I hope to see that too soon.
Great, keep an eye out for it.
Thank you all
so much for coming. We do have a bit of a crowd outside, so if you are able to exit,